Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. And the great lie is being shown up for what it is. The great lie, of course, being that trans women are women. This lie is being peeled away layer by layer like an onion. Only the tears aren't coming from the people doing the peeling. The tears are those vulnerable women who are suffering at the hands of men in jail. Particularly in the case we're looking at, a man who was convicted of P and R. He is a trans R of women with a conviction for P. A lovely human being, you may think, who shouldn't actually be in a jail at all, but personally I would say should be dangling, but that's a different video. We're going to look at this article about a woman who was abused by this man, and just to show up how dangerous the situation is when you're putting men in a room with vulnerable women. Here goes. Now I'm going to have to be very careful in the terminology I use here, but I will read out. I was SA'd by P trans ARA of women in women's jail. Female prisoner tells of the ordeal at the hands of notorious predator Karen White, not his real name, who molested 4 inmates in 3 months. And a female inmate has told of the attack at the hands of this notorious trans ARA of women. Laura Goldsmith warned about the risks of male-bodied prisoners in women's jails. So, this woman has had the bravery to come forward, to be honest, to put her face out there, to say what happened. So, why she was in prison, I don't care. She's done her time, she's faced her punishment, and she's out. And that punishment is the imprisonment. The punishment must not be what happened to her while she was in prison. That is something that needs to be completely investigated. And should never ever happen to anyone. But a female prisoner today warns of the dangers of putting transgender inmates in a women's jails after she was SA'd by a paedophile ARA behind bars. Laura Goldsmith, 38, revealed how she fell prey to notorious offender Karen White, not his real name as I say, in HMP Newhall in Wakefield in West Yorkshire, and in chilling echoes of the shocking case of transgender double ARA Isla Bryson being placed in an all-female jail in Scotland. Laura told how White was allowed to carry out a campaign of abuse in plain sight after being placed in the jail despite not having surgery, and boasted how he was not having hormone treatment. White was a convicted P and serial SO on remand for grievous bodily harm. So he has convictions for one form, convictions of something else, and was on remand for GBH. I mean, this guy should never have been in a jail of women at all, ever. But he was, because the authorities lack the balls to say, actually, no, you're a man, we don't care what you say, you're a man and you're going into a man's jail, look at the crimes you committed. So White went on to be jailed for life after SAing 2 inmates at Newhall. So there she is, this woman, she's, like I say, she's been very brave, she's come out and said what's happened. She could have kept her mouth shut and sort of disappeared in, and because that happens quite a lot, as we know, vulnerable women especially, when they're attacked like this, they tend to go insular, go inside. They don't want publicity. She has, got up and said that this man, despite the wig, he's a man, went in there and did these things to women. Anyway, bravely waiving her right to anonymity, Laura said she'd been failed by the system which had allowed predatory SOs to prey on vulnerable women, and speaking out in the hope that other women will never have to face a similar fate. Laura told Mail Online that there's no doubt that some men are using the transgender issue to get themselves inside women's prisons, partially because they know they'll have an easier time, but also to have access to vulnerable victims. These women become their victims. They're predators. These men are predators. He said they're either doing it because they're scared of men's prisons or because it gives them the opportunity to satisfy their perversions. And these are men trying to abuse the system, and they are being allowed to do so. Women are being put at risk by the system placing predatory men in their prisons. There needs to be a lot more vetting. No, it's quite simple. It is absolutely simple. You do a simple blood test. It shows whether that person is male or female. And at that point, that decides what jail they go into. It doesn't matter what they call themselves, how they identify, what they want to be, what their petty little desires are. You just deal with facts. And the fact is, he's a man. He goes into a man's prison. End of story. No appeal. No option. That's it. And you protect the vulnerable women from the predatory men. And those men that go into men's prisons scared will understand then the fear they've put into their victims, and quite right too. And hopefully the men in that prison will educate them somewhat. But anyway, she went on to say, women are being put at risk by the system placing predatory men in their prisons. You shouldn't be put in harm's way inside a prison. This should never be allowed to happen again. And she is right. Laura spoke out amid growing concerns over the safety of women in jails in the wake of transgender double Ara Bryson being locked up with women. Bryson, who was born Adam Graham, was moved to a male prison following an outcry which cost Nicola Sturgeon her job. It's a shame it didn't happen earlier, but that's what it is. We have this situation where these men like this, think, oh, if I pretend to be a woman, I won't go into a man's jail, as a P, because I know if I walked into a man's prison, there's going to be prisoners in there that will be very objectionable to me. They will not like me because I do things to children, and therefore I might have a really bad time in a man's prison. And so he says, I know, I'll pretend to be a woman so I can get into a women's prison. And then he does this sort of thing to women. Now, I think whoever made the decision to put a man in a woman's prison, and then that man has done these things, that person whose name is on the bottom of that piece of paper, that transfer, should be standing in a court today, guilty of all the crimes that man has committed, because he enabled it. He allowed this to happen, and he must be as guilty as the person who committed the crimes. And if you start doing that, you'll find there be a lot fewer people willing to sign on the bottom line to put a man into a woman's prison. And in fact, the law needs to change to just make it illegal to do so anyway, and that will end the issue. Anyway, I shall finish here and come up because it is a terrible situation, and I need to highlight it. I think this definitely needs to be highlighted, and we need to protect women. Yes, these women, like I say, they're in prison, but the prison is their punishment. He should not be their punishment. Anyway, coming up. The fact I keep reporting on things like this is actually quite depressing. It's the sort of issue that when it first was highlighted, it should have been acknowledged by the authorities and dealt with immediately at that point. It should not be now 2-3 years of constant going on about men attacking women in prison. And yet it continues. Men are still going into women's prison. The authorities are still signing off on this. It's cost Nicola Sturgeon her job, but it should be costing a lot more people their job too. The founding principle is that any man or woman who goes into prison should be safe. They should be safeguarded. As I say, their punishment is prison. It shouldn't be to be attacked by fellow inmates. That is not the principle on which we run our prisons. No one is safeguarding these women. No one is ensuring that their human rights are met. The only rights, the only protections given in these prisons are to these predatory men. It is wrong, it is morally wrong, it is ethically wrong, and I'm pretty damn sure it's legally wrong. It should not be happening, and no man should ever, regardless of what he thinks he is, be allowed to do his time in a woman's prison. Anyway, if you like what you're seeing here on the channel, do please hit the subscribe button down below. It really helps the channel, makes us louder. Ring the bell for notifications of future output. Leave a like, leave a comment. Please, please, please share the video. And until next time, stay safe, stay well. Do not listen to these people who claim to be women when they're men. And goodbye.